All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us, of course, by the official beer of the program. We're talking Johnny Cuba, European roots with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And, of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. And this weekend, Dolphins looking to make it 3 in a row, one back of the last wildcard spot. Dolphins have the Patriots. They're back home here this Sunday, 1 p.m. CBS. Spero Dedes is on the call. Spero, always good to talk to you. Is this the first Dolphin game you've had so far this season?
It is. It is. Good to be with you, Jonathan, as always. Good to hear your voice. It is our first trip to Miami, first trip to South Florida, and first trip to get to see these Dolphins this year. So crazy league. I mean, the fact that you just listened to you say that one game back of the final wild card slot, just wild. This league is so crazy.
Yeah, so they added a little extra juice to this game for you because, you know, by winning the last couple of games, that now becomes a talking point, I suppose, during the game, right? Like the Dolphins at 4-6, they're in the graphic, in the hunt when they throw it up on the television screen.
We like that. That makes for it gives us something to sink our teeth into going into a week of preparing for a new team that we haven't seen. And it's just crazy. I mean, you think back to 5-6 weeks ago, maybe a little bit earlier than that, week 3, after Tua got the concussion, and you know the chatter and the whispers that, you know, is Tua going to come back? You know, suddenly as a franchise, you got to start thinking of worst case scenario. And as you know, down there, being right in the thick of it, I mean, there was a stretch where we didn't know what his future was. Would he come back? How long would it be before he came back? And so to go from that to where they are now, winning multiple games suddenly in a row, suddenly the offense looks good. The defense, I think, is playing better, getting some of their injured players back. And now suddenly you're in the mix again. It's amazing. I mean, every time we watch Tua, we're reminded of his brilliance. We're also reminded of how fine that line is, Jonathan, of you know, being at the height of things with the excitement level, and then one hit away from everything changing in this league. And unfortunately, every time he straps it on now and goes onto the field, we're all going to watch with that kind of trepidation. But he's incredible.
What have you made of the discourse around Tua with the concussions? Because he's very combative when he's asked about it. Like he does not like everyone talking about what he should do with his life.
Yeah, and I get it. It's something that you know, at this stage, after the number of concussions, I think it's basically between him and his family what he wants to do. And if he was, God forbid, to get another concussion, whether it's this year or next year, I just think now he's such a beloved guy. He's such a respected guy. I think from the outside, it's of genuine concern that people have for him because he is such a well-liked player. But I can see from his perspective how it could get to a point where, you know, you just don't want to hear it anymore. And these guys, Jonathan, they're gladiators. I mean, they play through pain. I don't think the average person realizes what these guys put their bodies through. And in order to be a gladiator, I think you have to have a mental fortitude where you don't think about these things. You don't like to talk about these things. And of course, at this point, I'm sure he's tired of answering those questions. But the narrative is just what it's been, that Tua at this stage has to maybe change the way he plays a little bit. And you know, we'll just have to wait and see if they can protect him. And if he's lucky enough to get through these next, 10 weeks of the season, 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever is left, and stay healthy.
Isn't it strange the way as sports fans will look at the different sports where we have no problem giving our opinion of what Tua should do because he suffered from concussions. But this past weekend, 60 plus million people put on Netflix to watch Tyson and Jake Paul, when literally the objective to that event is to knock the other person out, which is in fact a concussion when you're knocked out cold. And we don't boxers. No, you should retire. You have too many concussions.
Yeah. Listen, if you're making the argument that we're all hypocrites, I put myself right at the top of that list. Although I will say I did not pay for the Netflix for the Tyson Jake Paul fight. It was at a restaurant. It was up in the background. So I took a couple of glances, but listen, I've never been a fan of boxing and those, UFC. I'm just, it was never my thing. But I completely agree. We're all full of it. We talk about on the one hand, in one breath, how we care about these guys and their well-being. And then we're, like crazed lunatics watching these heavy combat sports. I couldn't agree more. Well
Spero,
said.
who's the best team you've seen so far in the AFC?
Well, I think from afar, it's still obviously it's Kansas City. I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that. I think Buffalo is getting to where I think we all thought that they would be going into the season. Obviously,
did you put some extra weight on their win last week, Buffalo?
Oh, for sure.
Did that mean something to you? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, Kansas City's the measuring stick for Buffalo, and they haven't measured up to them the last couple of years. As they've gone on this run and climbed the AFC. So I think from their perspective, that was a huge psychological obstacle and a hurdle that they climbed. Now, whether or not that means they can go to Kansas City, which they will probably have to do in the playoffs, remains to be seen. But I think that was a good first step. Baltimore obviously started well. I don't know if I trust them in a big game yet. I think I need to see a little bit more. Obviously, Lamar has been incredible and in the MVP conversation, as he always is. But, it's Kansas City, Jonathan, and everyone else. In the NFC, Detroit continues to impress. I mean, they look like they're a team that I think has taken the necessary steps. They're obviously not a one-hit wonder. They've had really good success the last couple of years. And I just think Dan Campbell has built the infrastructure of that team to the point now where they're strong in every category. There are very few weaknesses. And so, we'll just wait and see. I think, again, it's kind of wide open in some respects. I think there's a number of teams that really have a chance. And so the NFL playoffs, as they always are, will be fun to watch.
Can you remember, obviously, a lot of us were wrong. I got to raise my hand. I was right there when Dan Campbell was hired by Detroit. I don't think I've ever been more wrong about a coach, maybe in any of our major North American sports, than I was about Dan Campbell.
I am so with you on that. We were in Miami when Dan was down there and when they made the change and he took over. And I remember walking out of the meeting saying, man, you know what? He's a guy I'd love to play for, but there was just something kind of goofy with Dan. Will he be able to command the room? Obviously played the sport, super respected, tough guy as a player, but sometimes that doesn't translate. And to think back to what he was as a coach at that point, interim coach, to what he's become now, I couldn't agree more. He has become such a impressive coach. There was some game management things like any young coach that he had to go through and perfect and improve on. And I think he's done that. And I think the testament to, a coach is many things, obviously, but the respect that he garners in the locker room and some of the decisions that he's made that have directly translated to success, I think that's become a long list. And Dan Campbell has become as good a coach as we've seen of this younger generation in the NFL.
Spero, going into this season, the Jets obviously had super high hopes. I never bowed in on it. Part of that's because the Jets get no love in the ZASLOW mansion here in Miami. But no matter, if you would have thought what the worst case scenario for this season could have been with the Jets, would it have looked anything close to this?
No, yeah, we had the Jets a couple weeks ago, and we've all been scratching our heads, man. Like, it just doesn't make sense because you look at this team on paper, Jonathan. They've got everything you need. They really do. I know the offensive line has had some issues, but it's basically the same defense on paper that they had that was a top 5 defense the last couple of years. So that box was checked.
They stink.
They haven't been the same. You know what? I think the mistake that they made was just firing Robert Saleh. It just was such a unnecessary knee-jerk reaction at that stage of the season. 5 weeks in, after everything that was said after last year, that, last year was a mulligan for Saleh because of Rodgers going down week 1. When you fire a coach in season in the NFL, more than any other sport, it is a traumatic. It is such a traumatic event. And the only time it makes sense is if you bring someone in who's going to change something. And Jeff Ulbrich, God love him, he's an extension of Robert Saleh. So what did you really accomplish by turning the whole thing upside down 5 weeks into the season? When, look, they're 2-3 at that point. It's not like they were out of it. They were still very much alive. Obviously, they had to improve in certain areas, but they just never recovered from that. And it was just one of those unnecessary decisions. And ironically, even for the Jets, it's only like the third time that they've ever fired a coach in season. So even for their perspective, with their history, it was a surprise move, and then they just have never recovered from that.
Spero, you're a New York guy, so I want to get your thoughts on this. You know, the Hall of Fame semifinalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame were announced. Eli Manning is among the group. It's been 5 years. We've been talking about this for 5 years now about Eli, because I think he's as interesting a case maybe there's ever been for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Give me some thoughts there on Eli.
Well, yeah, I agree. Number one, he had a really interesting, strange, up and down career. But as you know, if you win multiple Super Bowls in this market, I think at the end of the day, unless you've done something that really hurts your candidacy, I just think he's going to get in. Now, whether or not he gets in on his first try, I think is going to be real interesting. But if you're asking me if I think Eli is a Hall of Famer, I would probably lean towards yes. Do you not think he's going to get in?
I think he's going to get in first ballot. Which is kind of wild, but I do think he's a Hall of Famer, because I don't think you could properly tell the story of the NFL without acknowledging what he and the Giants did, not just once, but twice to the Patriots. And if you're part of the story of the National Football League, I think you got a great case for Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. You know, there were a number of years where Eli was, you know, I don't want to say subpar, but certainly not Hall of Fame like. So I think if you're making the opposite argument, you've got a strong case. But I think we'd all be shocked if Eli is not going to be in the Hall of Fame, probably in this first go round.
1 p.m. CBS, Spero Dedes, Adam Archuleta. They have the call from Hard Rock Stadium. Dolphins hosting the Patriots, looking for 3 in a row. Spero, always great catching up with you. Thanks so much for hopping aboard here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jonathan. Always appreciate it.